why are we still borrowing at pandemic levels?
Well, number one is
Pareho kasi halos 2.74 dati, ngayon 2.545.
okay. So one is,
Bakit ganun pa rin?
yes, so
Wala ng pandemic?
yes.
Some questions regarding the PhilHealth, is that correct? Nagtanong ka na sa PhilHealth, di ba? Parang na-monitor ko. Magpa-follow up lang ako, without prejudice or debate regarding the legality of the transfer of the PhilHealth funds to the National Treasury. May I query where the 89.9 billion funds transferred to the national government will be placed? I'm given to understand that it's in the unprogrammed fund, which projects in the unprogrammed fund refer to PhilHealth, because if I'm not mistaken, I remember Secretary Recto saying health for health, which I took to mean that the amount would be used solely for health expenditures. But later on, there were some statements that they would be used for infrastructure. Are we to assume they're going to be health and social infrastructural, still related to the mandate of PhilHealth?
In the interest of time, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I do have a list here.
We have a priority list, Madam Chair. While I'm getting my list, maybe Secretary Recto will.
So
It contained in the unprogrammed funds.
yeah, correct. Everything is written in the GAA 2024 in the portion for unprogrammed. There is a list there of 780 billion pesos, and we all know that we will not be able to fund the entire 780 billion. But the priority would be the foreign assisted projects, the government counterpart. As far as PhilHealth is concerned, the 20 billion that was remitted to the Treasury was spent already for the health workers' compensation, the frontliners during the pandemic. We spent something like 27 billion on that.
If I may interrupt, Secretary Recto, please. I've looked at the unprogrammed funds. They're not delineated in any way. And in fact, the foreign assisted, as we all know very well, are largely involving the OTR, the PWH,
Right.
and are not there for health, as you earlier had promised.
No, I never did promise health for health. All I said is that the first 20 billion.
So you were misquoted by the media, and there is no promise on your part or on the administration's part that the PhilHealth funds will be solely dedicated to the mandate of PhilHealth, and that is for health. Is that correct?
That is correct. But the reason for that is simple. There is also a budget with the health department. So if they can spend their money in the DOH and they need more money, then we could assist them. Pero it doesn't necessarily mean na, okay, kung natutulog yung pera sa PhilHealth, may natutulog sa DOH. Why will we give them more money? Right? So the DOH has
Is
to
the
spend their
ultimate
budget to
question the
spend that.
inefficiency and incapacity of PhilHealth, and that therefore it's capacity building and not the transfer of funds that would be the true answer to the question?
That is correct. That is correct.
Dapat hindi ilipat po. Dapat patibayin, patatagin, palakasin ang PhilHealth. Hindi bawasan ang pondo.
Well, number one, it will take time, I would suppose, before PhilHealth could improve their ability to improve their benefit packages.
But surely diminishing their financial resources would not make them any stronger in the immediate future, rather make them weaker.
We do not see it that way. At the moment, we know that they will be earning 250 billion a year. They roughly spend 150. They will still have 500 billion. By the end of this year, they will have about at least 575 to 600 billion. And that already takes away the 89.9 billion.
Yes, with all due respect, Mr. Secretary, you will understand that this will cause much anxiety and unhappiness among the PhilHealth members without even going into the legality and
Yes.
the debate regarding the ownership of PhilHealth funds.
With the permission of the gentle lady, there is no benefit package that will be reduced. In fact, the benefit packages will be increased.
Yes, but that's small comfort for those who are private and public members. After all, there is a long line of decisions from the Supreme Court with regards to the ownership of GSIS, SSS, that they are clearly not government funds, but I shall reserve that debate for another time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Recto. I'd also like to inquire from any of our financial managers. I think it's been repeatedly stated that our debt levels are at a healthy minimum, or at least in the middle area. But during the height of the pandemic in 2020, the country borrowed a total of 2.74 trillion. For 2025, we will borrow a total of 2.545 trillion. I heard yesterday the secretary indicating that very cheap loans were available during the previous administration during the pandemic from 2020 to 2022. And today we will borrow at much higher rates. And the question arises, why are we still borrowing at pandemic levels?
Well, number one is yeah.
Pareho kasi halos 2.74 dati, ngayon 2.545.
So one is,
Bakit ganun pa rin?
yes, so
Wala ng pandemic?
yes, first the interest rates are higher. The interest rates are higher today, so it's more costly to borrow today. That's number one. Number two, we have a deficit of about 1.5 trillion thereabout, and that's why we're borrowing for the deficit. Now, there will be maturities of roughly 1 trillion, which we essentially roll over. So we borrow the 1 trillion to pay for outstanding maturities, and that's why your borrowing is 2.5 trillion. But the increase in debt is only 1.5 trillion. The deficit.
Okay, it's still a little difficult to understand that regardless of the rising rates, the amounts are so close to pandemic levels. Are we never going to get out of this trap of servicing debt and the deficit and so on,
yeah.
and the interest payments?
Yes, with the permission of the gentle lady, if you take a look, in 2019, the debt to GDP ratio was 39.6%. This is a better matrix to use. It talks about, in effect, our ability to pay the debt. Now, in 2019, the debt matrix, debt to GDP was 39.6. In 2022, this shot up to 60.9% because of the pandemic.
Right.
Okay. Now, today, it is roughly about the same level, 24, a little lower than 60.9%.
Yes,
Okay.
but
So what that means is that as insofar as debt to GDP, it is slightly going down, it is not going up. So we're not borrowing more with that in that respect. Okay.
yes,
So
I
what we should be
understand that,
concerned
but
about- yeah.
just looking on its face, on the document as submitted, the NEP of 2025,
Mhm.
it's very, very clear that our spend on debt servicing has blown up to 25.4% this year. You said that we are borrowing much more expensively and that there are additional loans and that the pandemic loans are maturing,
Mhm.
but 25.4% is a huge rise by any measure.
I think that the interest expenses in the budget are automatically appropriated.
Yes, of course they are.
Yes,
But the amount
yes.
has never been 1/4. The increase is 25.4%, that's a
mistake.
humongous amount.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that there is a 25% increase, because as stated in the budget, in the BESF, it might have quoted a lower figure, but in reality, it was higher. So to me, I'd rather look at it this way. I think we're paying something, if I recall, 13% of the budget on interest expense.
With all due respect,
Actually,
Secretary Recto, the table was submitted by DBM. I'm merely quoting the financial managers back to themselves.
Mhm.
The debt burden in 2024 per the GAA was 699.17. 2025 NEP is 876.73, clearly indicating a growth rate of 25.4% from 2024 to the present.
Yep, and the revenues are also increasing.
But
Our
surely
economy
nowhere
is
near
also-
25%, sir.
Yes, that is correct, because interest rates are higher, as I mentioned earlier. So
This
again,
much higher, sir, 25%? Surely not.
It also includes the exchange rate, because the peso.
But I thought we just boasted about a very favorable exchange rate at 56 pesos,
Yes, but if we
maximum
compare,
58.
yes, if we compare it, that is as of today. But if we compare it to a few years ago, the exchange rate was 55, 53. So that's why our debts.
I
and that's
don't
why
recall the recent past being 53. Last year, it certainly wasn't 53, sir.
Two,
And
3
we're
years
only
ago, yes.
talking about 2024 po.
Okay, so 2-3 years ago, the exchange rate was at 53. And that has an effect on our interest expense. And that's why we're moving toward US dollars to Philippine pesos.
Okay.
We're managing the debt.
Is there any discussion of the BRICS at all? Just out of curiosity.
Not formally.
That our neighbors
Yes.
in ASEAN are very keen to join this new group, given the dollar's volatility and
Yes.
singularity, of course.
I'm glad you brought that out. And there have been no formal discussions in the cabinet or with the economic managers, but this is something that we are looking into in the DOF.